Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a new project, and this one is one that I've never done before. If you watch my channel, you know that that's the sort of thing that really gets me going. I like doing radios that I've never touched before so that, they prove to be a learning experience. I don't particularly dislike repeating, but because they then become easier. But when you've got something new, and especially something exotic like this one here, it just makes it a lot more interesting. Now, this is a Vega Selena B-217. That's a Russian-made, or rather USSR-made radio from the 70s, 80s. I'm not even sure what date it is. I've seen quite a few of these being restored, and I always wanted to do one. Now, good things come to those who wait, because I was actually looking to buy one of these some time ago, not so much to own it as to enjoy the experience of restoring it or repairing it. When René, René from the Nordmende, the Mende, who sent it to me as a gift a while ago, he contacted me and said he's got one of these and would I be interested in restoring it? So I'm a happy person. He sent me this, it arrived, no problems, and I got stuck in. But one thing I did first is I did a lot of research. And I've got to thank mainly three people for the information that I've picked up on this. One of them is Graham from Radio Cruncher. Thanks, Graham. Graham not only did some videos on this, which I've watched, but he also sent me a hell of a lot of information. The other channel is Simon Spears. He did a couple as well, and I went through those. He had a real problem with FM, which I hope I don't run into. And the other one was Andrew from Andrew AUSFA. He's done a couple of those as well, and I've also watched those. Each one came across different issues. Now, the problem with this radio is you can find information, but getting it in English is sometimes a problem. And so it always helps that we have this community, this brotherhood of restorers, where you help each other. That's the whole point. So if this sort of radio interests you, stick around and hope you enjoy the series. But before we carry on, I just want to thank the sponsors of this video, PCBWay. Right now, they're in the middle of their 5th PCB design contest, and they're inviting you to join. If you have any project ideas, by all means, participate. The prizes are really, really amazing. Have a look for yourself. You just go to their website, pcbway.com, look for the link to the contest, and get cracking. And they'll also serve you well with any other needs you have, like CNC machining, 3D printing, anything else you need, they'll sort you out. And here she is, the Selena B-217, sold in under various brand names, but apparently built in the USSR and some made for export. This is obviously one of them. It's got to do with the range for FM. From what I've read, I believe the FM range in the USSR was different. Now this one is in impeccable condition. I mean, look at this thing. The body is absolutely perfect. No stains, no dings, no scratches. Even the wood is in very, very, very good condition. The antenna, which is one of the usual fault points, is in perfect state. There's one slight fault, if I can call it that, and that is that these buttons seem to be bent. You can see that as you turn them, the distance from the back changes, so there's obviously something bent in here. It might just be this was fitted incorrectly, but we'll soon have a look at that. But other than that, this thing is beautiful, or as beautiful as a clunky radio can be. They do look quite clunky, make no mistake, but that's sort of beauty in its own right. Now, there's not much to the back. I've removed it already, and all it took was 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this thing just comes out. The battery compartment obviously came out first, but I wanted to test it, so I've connected some supply points there. But all it's got here is it's got an antenna connector, antenna and ground for external antenna. It's got an earphone socket. It's got a record-in or recording connector here. It's a DIN connector. And then there's the mains connector here as well. And that's one of the problems. This is a rather odd mains connector. It's got 3 pins here. There's a sort of a protrusion down the middle so you don't get it the wrong way around. Obviously this will be mains, neutral, live, and earth. Now this is something I need to look at because the owner of this radio has asked me to do a few little modifications. This is what he said. He doesn't really care about originality, so he doesn't care that I replace those the capacitors with modern capacitors, things like that. There are a few electrolytics on here. Those will have to go. And the other thing he asked is if I could make this a usable connector. So somehow I need to fix that so that I can use a figure 8 or something like that to power the mains. The other thing he'd like is the headphone socket to be stereo, because this is only obviously mono. He'd like this to be a stereo socket, so when he plugs in headphones, he doesn't have sound coming only on the one side. It's rather annoying. So there are a few things that I can do here. I think with the age this thing has got, I'll probably need to replace all those capacitors. It's a bit of a shame because these are really characteristic of these radios. I'll have to think about this. He did say he doesn't care that if I need to Frankenstein this thing, but I do not want to Frankenstein this thing unnecessarily because I do want this to remain as original as possible. His idea is to use this thing for the rest of his life, so it's got to last because I expect him to last. So yeah, okay, I took the back off because I wanted to test it, and one of the main things I wanted to look at was the turret tuner here. Now, if you know anything about these radios, you know it uses a turret tuner. It's got quite a few shortwave bands, a long wave, medium wave, and FM. So when you want to change bands, you do that. And what it does is it brings in these circuits into the front end, the antenna circuit, the RF front end, and the intermediate stage amplification as well. So for every band, different components come into the circuit. And the problem is that these connectors usually get a little bit dull and they don't make good contact. So you need to clean them carefully. But as I'll show you in a minute, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I don't think we have intermittent faults on the bands. The problem is somewhere else. Now I've got this thing connected to the external power supply and I want to test it. So we'll just power on. I've got this on shortwave 1. I've got the antenna up, just the rod antenna. I've got no mini whip connected to this, and we'll see if we can pick up anything. Now shortwave 1 is, where's shortwave 1? Yeah, it's the high frequencies. We may actually pick up something at this time of day. It's the 19 meter band. Not much there, is it? Shortwave 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the mini whip to the rod antenna. I'm just connecting the mini whip to the actual rod. Give it a chance. This it's not usual that I would get anything at this time of day anyway, but I just want to test it out. Picking something up there. Our tone control works, obviously. Yeah, so something's making a hell of a racket. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's my internet connector. Internet over mains. Or maybe it's the radio, but I've had this before with other sets. Don't expect anything at these frequencies this time of day. Let's try medium wave. Yeah, it's the usual noises. Now, the problem is FM. Now, he told me that that was the problem. That was the main issue, was that he was not receiving FM at all. Now, I've tried it, and let's see what we've got. I'm getting some FM, but the volume is on max. This is on max volume. This should be a lot clearer, it's distorted. So we do have an FM problem, and this is not unusual for these sets. They are notoriously bad at FM, not at receiving FM, but going off on FM. And there are a few tricks to improve that. Now, before I go in and look at the schematics, and I've got a lot of information. Graham, thank you very much. Graham from Radio Crunch just sent me a hell of a lot of information. I also watched his videos. Simon Spears did another couple, I think he did. I've watched those videos. Andrew as well, Andrew at Andrew USSR. Those are all channels I've seen this radio being restored at. Maybe it's not the same model, but they're about the same. So I learned a lot from those videos, and Graham sent me a ton of information, including a service manual, which is in English, believe it or not. It's sort of typed, double-space typing, but it's in English because, yeah, I can't read. I can hardly read the component values, let alone the instructions in Russian. But one of the things they all found was that you can actually improve the FM by adjusting one particular trimmer at the back there, and I'll show you. That's on maximum volume, and what they found was if you come to the back here and if you adjust this trimmer here, it improves. Let's hear it. Something wrong here. This thing is shorting. So I found this when I was playing with it yesterday. I've got to be careful. I mustn't push that in. I then have to see what it is that's actually shorting to the case. But if I adjust this, so as you can see, the volume has gone up. I can now take it off maximum volume. But here's the problem.
Saúde, mas da questão ambiental.
That's not bad, is it?
Para a qual todos contribuímos, para a qual.
Aí está.
However, I don't believe that this is the problem with FM. You see, when I looked at the schematic, this particular trim pot is actually used to bias a transistor which is already in the audio stage after the detector, after the ratio detector. So this is not actually improving reception. All this is doing is increasing the volume, the level, or the gain of that transistor, so it increases the level of the signal that you're getting from the FM. What I'm looking for is to actually improve the FM. Now, quite a few hints have been given. Now, obviously, I need to check the schematic and the instructions to see which line of this is the FM. There's the FM front end, I know that, but I think it's really the bottom ones, maybe even that one as well. And I could try adjust the IF, but somebody's been mentioning this. I've seen this mentioned a few times, and Graham brought it up as well. There are 4 capacitors in here that are actually pretty hard to see. Those little bead things, these things are like 24 picofarads. This is in the IF amplification stage or signal path. And in the forums, they actually mention it. I found a forum that I did Google Translate on, and then Graham sent me that information as well. So they look like little beads, little red ones. There's one there. There's another one, 2, and there's one down there, 3, 4, is it? I think I've counted that one. Anyway, there are 4 of them on here, and the recommendation is that you replace them. Now, these capacitors apparently are the capacitors that are generally responsible for messing up the FM on these radios. This brand or this series of capacitor went off. They'd go very high. They would detune the entire IF line. And so what you need to do is you need to swap out those capacitors and then realign the specific coil, the specific IF transformer, because that's part of the resonance circuit of the IF transformer. Now, you might say, okay, well, I could just adjust the IF transformer. Yeah, you could, but the point about an IF transformer is you should be able to adjust through a peak. In other words, when you adjust the IF transformer, you should get to the point where it's peaked, and if you carry on, it should go down again, right? So you should be able to go from low to high to down again. Now, that's because you are adjusting the inductance of this coil to resonate with whatever capacitors are in that tank circuit. Now, the capacitors are dimensioned, they're the ones that are fixed. They're dimensioned so that the amount of leeway that you have on the core, on the inductor, allows you to go through the peak, through the resonant peak. Now, if this thing gets particularly high, very high, to the point where you can't peak it, what will happen is you'll keep going till you get, say, to the end or to the beginning, and it'll keep going up, 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 up in terms of response, right? But it won't go down again. So that's why you got to get these things right. Now, that's the other reason why I don't have 24 picofarad capacitors. I've got 22. So I don't think that's a problem. I'm going to use a 22 picofarad capacitor in there. So I should be able to peak it, because I then will have to adjust the IF chain, but I intended to do that anyway. So, yeah, I think I know where to start. I know where I am. I'm going to do the usual stuff. I'm going to start with the obvious. I'm going to clean these. They need to be cleaned anyway. And then I'm going to remove this from the case. I'm not sure that I'm going to touch that yet. I think I'm going to look at those capacitors, swap out the electrolytics. I've actually tried bypassing these electrolytics with good capacitors. It made no improvement. So I'll probably go for the capacitors on this board. I'll swap out the electrolytics and those 4 little ceramic caps. See where we are. Perhaps then do an alignment, and then at the end, I'll come and look at this power supply and see what I can do about these capacitors. I want to leave these guys in there, even if I have to drill out the insides. I really think these things are very characteristic. And I don't know, I'm reluctant to make this thing look completely different. I know that René said he doesn't care, but it's just something I don't want to do, which is to decharacterize it to the point where it loses, you know, some of its aesthetic value. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to attack this section and see how we get along.